Have you ever wondered how two giant cruise ships can collide despite having advanced radar, GPS, experienced bridge officers, and strict international navigation rules? It sounds almost impossible, yet it has happened more than once. In this video, we'll revisit 5 of the most famous cruise ship collisions of the modern era. Some caused only cosmetic damage, while others changed the cruise industry forever. We'll follow each ship's route, explain exactly where the accident happened, and reveal the chain of events that led to these unforgettable moments. On the morning of December 20th, 2019, 2 ships from the same cruise line collided at the same port. An almost unbelievable coincidence that was caught on video by dozens of passengers and bystanders on shore. The Carnival Glory was sailing a 7-night cruise to the Western Caribbean out of New Orleans, Louisiana. The Carnival Legend was on its own week-long Caribbean voyage, departing from Tampa, Florida. Both ships had scheduled to stop at Cozumel, the popular Mexican island resort, and that's where their paths violently crossed. At around 8:50 a.m. local time, the Carnival Glory was maneuvering to dock when strong wind gusts and currents pushed it off course. Passengers watched in disbelief as the 290-meter Glory slowly arced through the water and slammed into the already docked 294-meter Carnival Legend with a loud boom. The Legend's bow scraped along the stern of the Glory, crushing several balcony cabins and shattering windows. Video even shows the Glory nearly clipping a third ship, Royal Caribbean's Oasis of the Seas, which was also in port that morning. 6 passengers aboard the Carnival Glory sustained minor injuries, some while being evacuated from the dining room on decks 3 and 4. Carnival stated that neither ship's seaworthiness was affected, and both completed their itineraries. The Legend returned to Tampa 2 days later, while the Glory sailed on to New Orleans. An investigation pointed to sudden wind gusts as the likely cause, though no final technical fault was ever publicly confirmed for either crew. This is arguably the most viral cruise ship collision of the decade, a moment of sheer panic captured from a dozen different angles as tourists ran for their lives on a narrow Venetian dock. The MSC Opera, a 65,000-ton ship carrying around 2,600 passengers, was completing a Mediterranean cruise and returning to its home port of Venice for a scheduled turnaround. It was sailing its usual scenic approach along the Giudecca Canal, a route that takes ships directly past St. Mark's Square, heading toward the San Basilio Cruise Terminal. At around 8:30 a.m., as the Opera approached its berth accompanied by 2 tugboats, it suffered a sudden loss of engine control. Despite the tug's efforts, cables connecting them to the ship snapped, and the Opera continued moving toward the dock with its horn blaring in warning. The massive ship crashed first into the pier itself, then plowed into the stern of a much smaller vessel docked nearby, Uniworld's 130-passenger river cruise ship, the River Countess. Tourists on the River Countess, many of whom had just disembarked, were seen running and even falling into the water trying to escape. 4 tourists were injured, 2 Australians, an American, and a New Zealander, all between the ages of 67 and 72. An investigation later found the crash was preventable. Naval authorities determined that MSC Opera's officers should have shut down the engines the moment the steering failure occurred, rather than continuing to approach with reduced control. In 2021, the ship's captain and several officers were sentenced to jail time in Italy, and years later, in a UK High Court ruling, MSC was ordered to pay Uniworld $2.7 million in damages. The incident reignited a fierce, long-running debate in Italy over banning large cruise ships from Venice's historic canals altogether, a ban that was eventually enacted for vessels over 25,000 gross tons. The Costa Classica, carrying around 1,680 passengers, was finishing a 4-night cruise that began in Jeju, South Korea, and was heading back to its home port of Shanghai, China at the end of the voyage. At 4:46 a.m. local time, just as a local pilot was about to board the ship to guide it into port, the Classica reportedly suffered a power glitch. In the darkness near the mouth of the Yangtze River, the cruise ship collided with the Lowlands Longevity, a Belgian-registered bulk carrier that was sailing in the same direction. The impact tore open a gash roughly 30 meters long along the starboard side of Deck 5, well above the waterline, but wide enough to destroy or damage around 60 cabins, 11 of them severely. 3 passengers, mostly from the mostly Asian passenger group aboard, were taken to a hospital ashore with minor injuries. Others were treated on board. The Classica limped into Waigaoqiao port later that morning for inspection. Remarkably, repair crews at a nearby shipyard on Changxing Island welded a new steel hull section onto the ship in just 96 hours. Costa was forced to cancel the ship's next repositioning cruise to Hong Kong, though the following scheduled voyage was delayed by only 2 days. It wasn't even the Classica's first brush with disaster. The ship had also been involved in a collision with the MSC Poesia back in 2008 while at anchor. Norwegian Cruise Line's Norwegian Star was midway through a 7-day cruise that had departed from New York, with a scheduled stop at the Royal Naval Dockyard in Kings Wharf, Bermuda, docked right alongside Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas. While both ships sat peacefully in port, a sudden and violent squall swept through the area, with wind gusts reportedly reaching up to 75 miles per hour. According to Bermuda's transport minister at the time, Walter Roban, the gale force winds snapped 2 of the Norwegian Star's mooring lines, setting the massive ship adrift within the harbor. Crew members scrambled to respond, lowering anchors, engaging bow thrusters, and radioing for emergency assistance. But the ship still drifted into the stern of the docked Explorer of the Seas before tugboats and a line boat could bring it back under control roughly 45 minutes later. A passenger aboard the Explorer of the Seas caught the entire moment of impact on video from the ship's Windjammer Cafe. You can even hear a Royal Caribbean crew member shout, "You hit my ship!" as the 2 hulls scraped together. Fortunately, no passengers were injured on either vessel, and officials reported only minor cosmetic damage, a dent in the Norwegian Star's lower hull and light scuffing on the Explorer of the Seas. Divers were later sent to inspect both ships' hulls and propulsion systems before they were cleared to continue their voyages. The Norwegian Star finished its cruise back to New York as scheduled, though the Explorer of the Seas experienced some delay. This is the incident that changed everything, the deadliest cruise ship disaster in decades, and one of the most infamous maritime accidents of the 21st century. The Costa Concordia, one of the largest cruise ships operating in Europe at the time, had just departed Civitavecchia, the port serving Rome, at the very start of a week-long Mediterranean cruise. Its planned course would take it along the Italian coastline before continuing on towards Savona, Marseille, and Barcelona. But it never made it past the first night. As part of what's known in the industry as a sail past, a maneuver to salute residents of the small island of Giglio, Captain Francesco Schettino ordered the ship to sail dangerously close to shore, far closer than its charted route allowed. Around 9:45 p.m., the Concordia's port side struck a rocky reef known as Le Scole, tearing a 50-meter gash in the hull below the waterline. Water flooded several compartments almost instantly, and the ship began listing severely. Remarkably, the crew didn't declare an emergency for over an hour, and the order to abandon ship wasn't given until well after the vessel had already begun capsizing, by which point many lifeboats on the ship's high side could no longer be lowered. The ship, carrying more than 4,200 passengers and crew, ultimately ran aground and rolled onto its side just off the coast of Giglio. The chaotic, delayed evacuation lasted through the night. In total, 32 people lost their lives. Captain Schettino was later convicted of manslaughter and abandoning ship, sentenced to 16 years in prison. The wreck itself became a massive engineering undertaking, the largest ship ever to be righted and removed in a single piece, a salvage operation that took over 2 years and cost more than $1 billion. The Costa Concordia disaster prompted sweeping changes to international cruise safety regulations, including mandatory muster drills before departure, a rule now followed by every cruise line in the world. From a sudden squall in Bermuda to a fatal shipwreck off the Italian coast, these 5 incidents are a reminder that even in an age of GPS navigation, satellite weather tracking, and billion-dollar engineering, the sea remains unpredictable. Behind every crumpled hull and canceled cruise were split-second decisions, mechanical failures, and forces of nature no captain could fully control. And in one case, consequences that reshaped maritime safety rules for the entire industry.